We'll find out. Okay, so we'll keep going. So the person on the left just says Yuri Gagarin, and he was the very, very first person in space. Nobody had ever been before in 1961. So a lot of people know his name. And then the person on the right, you have to look through the glass. This is someone who's very famous in the UK at the moment because he is Tim Peake. And he is a British astronaut. He's not the first British astronaut, he's the second. But he spent 6 months on the International Space Station, mostly in 2016. And so these are names and people that people think, oh, this is space, and they're all men. And they think, oh, space is for boys, I can't do that. And it's not. Space is for absolutely everybody. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about how through the history of space, we've had people doing amazing things. And I'm going to go right back to the very beginning. And this shiny object on the screen, this is Sputnik. This is the very first, or is a model of the very first satellite that went into space in 1957. And it was launched by the Soviet Union. Now, at the time, in the 1950s, after the Second World War, the Soviet Union and the United States of America were very they didn't like each other. They were two countries who were fighting for what the right way to live and to run countries was. And when this satellite started flying around the world, going over and over and over the United States of America, sending out a radio signal that anybody could hear, it went beep, beep, beep. And if you had a radio, you could tune in and hear this satellite flying overhead. And everybody in America got really very worried, because if their big enemies in the Soviet Union could start flying satellites overhead, well, what was going to come next? Was it going to be bombs? Was it going to be spy satellites? And so America wanted to prove to the world that they could do the same thing, that they could also launch a satellite in space. So a couple of months later, 3 months later, in December, they gathered everybody around. They invited all the media cameras, all the newspapers. They said to everybody, we're going to launch our satellite. You have to come and watch. And the countdown went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then that happened. It was a big fireball. The spacecraft, the rocket rose, went up and up and up, and it went about a meter off the ground, and then it started going backwards, and it fell into a big fireball, and everybody had watched. And it was a huge embarrassment for America. They had everybody watching, and there was this big fire explosion, and they couldn't do it. So they had to find another plan. So this spacecraft had been launched by one group of people, but they had another group of people who were making a spacecraft and satellite. They went to somebody called Werner von Braun. Now, Werner von Braun had come from Germany. In the Second World War, Werner von Braun had been working for the Germans and had been designing technology to make bombs that were raining down all across Europe, including in the UK. And after the Second World War, his knowledge of how to make flying machines and rockets had gone two ways. Some of it had gone to the Soviet Union, which is why they were ahead, and some of it went to the US. And it was Werner von Braun who's saying, yes, I have a rocket and we have a satellite that we could launch into space, but there is a problem. The problem was that the satellite was too heavy for the rocket that he had developed. It couldn't get into space. And he said, I can do it, but I need to make a better fuel. I need a more explosive, powerful fuel that I can put into my rocket and get it all the way up into space. And so his managers went to a company that made rocket fuel, and they said, we have this problem. We need the best man to work on this problem and find us a new rocket fuel. And the managers looked at each other at the company and they said, we know who you need. You need Mary. You need Mary Sherman Morgan. And the managers went, no, we want a man. We really, really, really want a man for the job because a man will do it better. And Mary didn't have a degree. In the World War, she had gone to university to study chemistry, and she was brilliant at chemistry. But she had then had to go and work for the war effort. Not only that, Mary, when she was young, she grew up on a farm. And at her farm, she was expected to have to tend the crops and work on the farm. But she really liked maths and she really liked science. So she ran away from home to go to school because she really, really, really wanted to study chemistry. This was back in like 1930. This was a long, long time ago. So you don't run away from home now. But she wanted to study science so much that she ran away from home. And that was how she became a brilliant, brilliant chemist. She knew all about the different materials, the different elements, the different compounds that could make rocket fuel. And so eventually they said, okay, you can have Mary. And Mary worked together with a team. She looked through her books, she worked out, she solved the problem, and she invented a brand new fuel called hydine. And on the 31st of January, 1958, so just 2 months after that big explosion, her rocket fuel was loaded into the Explorer 1 satellite and into the rocket. And finally, the rocket launched into space, and America got their first satellite in space. And it was all thanks to Mary. So America would not have been able to get into space at all if it hadn't have been for Mary and her rocket fuel. Not long after this, Mary stopped working at the company because she wanted to go, she got married, she wanted to have children, she had a family, and this was in the 1950s when she had to stay at home and look after her children. And she didn't tell anybody about all of her work. And it was only after she died that her son started finding out just how important and exciting her work had been. So that's Mary. So after we'd got satellites into space, the next task was to get astronauts, humans, into space. And I showed you that picture of Yuri Gagarin at the start. And this is the spacecraft, this is the satellite, this is the rocket that took Yuri into space. This was Vostok 1 on the 12th of April, 1961. And it changed the world because suddenly there was a human in space. And Russia, the Soviet Union, they had claimed that very big first. America followed, but the Russians, the Soviet Union, they always knew when somebody was going to remember something. They wanted to chase the first. And so just 2 years later, in 1963, the very first woman to go into space was somebody called Valentina Tereshkova. Now, Valentina was an amazing parachutist. She loved doing all sorts of things. When she was young, she wanted to be a train driver because she'd seen the trains go past and take everybody off into the big lights of the city. So she wanted to be a train driver. And she joined a parachuting club because she enjoyed, she wanted some adventure in life. She wanted to do different things. And that was how she was found and chosen to train as the first woman to go into space. Because when these spacecraft came back to Earth, they crash landed. If you couldn't jump out and parachute back down to Earth, you weren't going to survive because we were still learning how to put people into space. And so in 1963, Valentina was sitting on the launch pad. But just as lots of things happened in the Soviet Union, it was all very, very secret. She couldn't tell her parents what she was doing. So she had told them that she had gone off to train for an acrobatic club, for a parachuting competition. And she wrote letters back to her mother, telling her what she was doing, making up lots of stories. And then when she got into space in 1963, her mother's next door neighbor came running round and said, Eleanor, your daughter is in space. And she said, no, she can't be in space. She's at my parachuting competition. She said, look, I have letters from her. And she said, the neighbor said, no, you have to come and look. And it wasn't until her mother rushed round to her neighbor's house and saw her daughter on TV in space that she believed that her daughter had gone all the way to space. And so that was, she'd got into space, but then there were problems. The mission didn't go very well. Valentina realized that the software that had been loaded into the computer had gone wrong, and it was going to point the spacecraft in the wrong way. And if the rockets fired, it wouldn't bring her back to Earth. It would send her further and further out into space, and she would die. So she realized this, and she let mission control know. And they fixed it, and they sent up some right commands, and they brought her home. But when everybody said, oh, the mission, it went well, but everyone knew it had nearly ended in disaster, they all blamed Valentina, because Valentina was a woman. And so she was the one who could take all the blame. Of course, it was her fault because she was a woman. And it took 30 years until the 1990s when the engineers who had made the problems actually finally said, you know what? It was our fault. And they told the truth and made it clear that it wasn't Valentina's problem. But that whole time, Valentina had kept up with the story because she knew that's what she had to do. And that was the way of the world. So Valentina was the first woman in space. But the first Americans in space were all men. These were the Mercury 7 astronauts, and these were the 7 military test pilots that were chosen to train to make the first flight by America into space. There was a program back in the 1960s to try and find a woman who could go into space. All of these people had to go through the most terrible set, the most hideous set of medical tests to get into space. And the doctors, because no one knew what was going to happen when you went into space, the doctors wanted to make sure that these people were really, really fit. And so they put all their candidates through the most terrible set of tests. They stuck electrodes into them to see how their muscles were going to work. They poured water into their ears to make their balance go funny. They put them in isolation tanks where they couldn't see anyone or hear anything floating in water, and they didn't tell them how long they were going to be in there for, and they just left them in there. They spun them around and around. They stuck needles in them. They put things up their bottom. They did everything. They put something into every different bit of the human body. And at the end of it, these were the 7 people who they thought, you are the most perfect physical specimens and you can fly. Now, the doctor who had done all of this testing was called Randy Lovelace. And Randy thought he wanted to see how women would do, because he knew that we could send women into space as well. And so he one day met somebody called Jerry Cobb. Now, Jerry was a fantastic pilot. She was a test pilot. She flew aerobatics. She flew loop-the-loop. She was a really, really, really good test pilot. And one day, Jerry and Randy met each other. And Randy realized Jerry was the person that he'd been looking for. And he said, Jerry, will you go through all the same set of testing, please? And Jerry jumped at the chance. So Jerry went through the testing, and she also found a group of 18 women who would go all through the testing. Jerry went first. She was the guinea pig. She was the trial run. And Jerry passed with flying colors. She got through all the same physical tests as the men did. And so did 12 other women. They all got through these tests just the same as the men. And you know what? Randy found that not only did they pass the tests, but in some cases they did it better. And they did not complain as much. They had a much higher threshold for pain. They just got on with it. They did it. And so they went through all these tests. They showed that they absolutely had the same abilities as the men who were going to be going into space. Now, NASA never officially accepted this program. It was all done privately with Jerry. But the longer it went on, the more these women thought that maybe NASA would take note and that some of these people would be selected and they would be the first people to go into space, or the first women to go into space. But NASA was having to get ready to go to the moon, to get Neil Armstrong eventually all the way to the moon. And they saw the idea of women going into space as just a complete distraction, as something we didn't need to do. And so at the very top, they said, no, we're going to stop this. And these people never got into space. But just recently, you might have seen in the news, one of the 13 women alongside Jerry was called Wally Funk. I don't have a picture of her now, but I'll get you one. But Wally Funk finally made it into space last month when she was on the first flight of the Blue Origin spacecraft that went all the way into space and back. It didn't orbit the Earth, but she finally made it into space. So that was what happened with the first women that never quite made it into space. And they say the reason they didn't was because America was really busy getting ready to try and send people to the moon. And that's what happened next. And this is one of the big Saturn V rockets taking off. And these were the rockets that would take the astronauts to the moon. Now, to get to the moon, all of this rocket had to be designed and built, and it had to have a computer in it that would tell the spacecraft where to go, that could work out how to work things happen. And this was the computer that was in charge of the command module, the little bit, if you look at this, right at the very, very top of that rocket. Let me see, I don't know if I can get a pointer. No, but if you look right at the top of that photograph, the very, very top, that's where the astronauts sit.
We can see your pointer.
Ah, wonderful. There you go. So just there, that's where the astronauts sit. And in there's the command module, and there's a computer that told everything what to do. And this was the computer. Now, this might look really old and really quite big. You think, I don't know if you can still see me anyway, but this is my phone. And my phone is teeny tiny compared to this computer and has so much more memory and ability and power than this computer. This was about the size of a really, really big shoebox. And it had all the instructions the astronauts needed to get to and from the moon. And the computer code that was written for this was in all these books. Now, the person standing next to all these books and the stack of it all is Margaret Hamilton. Now, I have known this picture of Margaret Hamilton and that she was involved in the code for the computers for a long time. But I didn't know the story of what it was. And for a long time, I just thought that Margaret Hamilton was on the team and she was the token female, the only female on the team. And so this was a nice picture because she stood there. She wasn't just the only person on the team. Margaret Hamilton was in charge. She managed the team of people that came up with all this code. She even invented the term software engineering, which we all use today. It's what people who write code do. She invented that. And I didn't know all of this. Now, Margaret, when she was little, she loved maths. So she went to university to study maths. And as she finished university, she heard that MIT, a university out in California in America, she heard they were recruiting people to write the software for the Apollo spacecraft. And she thought, yes, that's what I want to do. That sounds like my dream job. So she went, she found it, she made sure she applied for it, she got the job, and she ended up being in charge of everybody who wrote the software. Now, when she was doing this, she had a young daughter called Lauren. And Lauren was your age, really. She was maybe 4 or 5 or 6, but Margaret had to work long hours. It was very important that all this code get finished so that everybody could get to the moon. And so she would take her daughter to work. And one day, Lauren was playing with the computer. She was playing with the model of the computer. Where is it? Where's my mouse gone? Pressing all the buttons on here, just playing around as young people might do. And she crashed the computer. Now, Margaret said, "Oh," and she was very worried. She wanted to make sure that the astronauts wouldn't crash the computer. So she rang up NASA. She talked to NASA, and she said, "There's this problem. I want to fix it." And NASA said, "Nah, don't be so silly. The astronauts, they're very clever. They will not do the same thing as your young daughter." On Apollo 8, the first mission that flew around the moon, Jim Lovell did exactly the same thing as her daughter had done. Now, fortunately, Margaret knew what to do so she could help the astronauts fix it. So astronauts can be just as stupid or as young people, or really better, the young people are just as clever as astronauts. So Margaret wrote all this code. She had the team that did it, and she was in charge not just of the code for going to the moon, but also in the Skylab, which was the space station that followed it, and the space shuttle that followed that. Margaret has been an amazing figure writing software for space missions. Now, the software that she wrote had to be turned into a computer to go into this cardboard, this shoebox. And this shoebox had to withstand all the vibrations of launch as the rocket shake and shake and shake and gets all its way up to space and onto the moon. This shoebox had to be able to withstand it. And computers in the 1960s were very, very delicate, and they were very temperamental, and they were very, very prone to breaking. And so the engineers came up with a way to build the computer where they literally hard coded the ones and the zeros. So computer code, all of this code ultimately is all ones and zeros. That's the language that computers talk in. We have different letters, A, B, C, D, E. The computers just have ones and zeros. And what the engineers did was they came up with a system where they had some copper wires and they had some rings, and you just either put the wire through the ring for a 0, or around the ring for a 1. It might be the other, back to front, I can't remember, but each way meant a 1 and a 0. And so you literally stitched all this in. Now, the engineers who designed this needed some people who were very used to working with fiddly wires to come up with it all, to make all of this a reality. And they worked out that the best people to do all this work were people who made watches. And these were all the ladies from Waltham, Massachusetts, who made watches, and they knew and they were so used to working with all this detailed work. If you look closely, you can see here, this is the board, all the different rings, and these two ladies are passing wire from one side to the other, coding in the ones and zeros. This was very, very detailed, tricky work. It took hours and hours, months, to weave all the different bits of code that would all get packaged up and put into that computer. These women were so important that they were paid to sit around and do nothing. So when there was no work to do, they were still paid, because the company Raytheon knew that if they went back to their jobs making watches, that they would be lost. They wouldn't be able to come and do the important work to build the moon computers. So they were really, really, really valuable people. But when I was learning about them and learning their stories, I could not find anybody's names. The company called Raytheon even say on their website, we're not interested in finding out who these people are. We don't know. There are videos on YouTube of the managers giving interviews to the television cameras, explaining how these computers get built. Of course, they are all men. And the women in the background are busy working, and none of their names are ever said. And so when I was writing the book, Galaxy Girls, I wanted to find out who these people were, and wanted to sort of, find out who they were, find out their stories. I couldn't find anything. I did lots and lots of research. I couldn't find anything. And then just finally, as the book was about to go to print, I found one interview that had one name in it with somebody called Mary Lou Rogers. And so I know that Mary Lou Rogers was part of this. I don't know anything about Mary Lou Rogers, but I know that it was one name. But there were lots and lots of others, and all of their names at the minute have been lost to history. And so it's so important to find out, what the people in your family did, what they might have done, because a bit like these people and a bit like Mary Sherman Morgan, their important work can get lost. The computers that they built was so good, and the code that Margaret Hamilton wrote was so good, that when the Apollo 12 spacecraft heading off to the moon got struck by lightning and electrocuted, and the computers shut down and got frazzled, and far too much electric current went through them, they turned them back on and they were fine. So all the engineering, all the code that Mary Hamilton wrote, all these computers that all the ladies put together, they were fine. And I should just finally say, I've put here, they're called the little old ladies. And they weren't the little old ladies. They certainly weren't little, and they certainly weren't old. But that was what some of the male engineers who didn't really, they didn't care about them. They didn't know who all these names were. They gave them this title. But it was the little old ladies who were not little and who were not old who built those computers. After we went to the moon, the next big adventure for America was the space shuttle. And the space shuttle was going to roar up into space. It was a modern way of flying. It was a reusable space plane that was going to change how everything worked. But we needed astronauts to fly on that. And finally, at the end of the 1970s, NASA decided that it was okay and it was time for their astronauts to represent a bit more about what the world looked like. And it was time to start having women, and it was time to start having Black and Asian people in their astronaut corps. So they wanted to go and find people to fly it. Now, this lady, who you might recognize, she's called Nichelle Nichols, and she was an actress in Star Trek. And now in 1975, she was at a convention, and she was hearing NASA's Director of Sciences speak. And she was the one who said she saw that the space sector didn't look like everybody else. She said it was all full of white men, and she said it's not representative. And she felt very strongly that this wasn't right. And so, because she was a famous actress playing in Star Trek, she made a speech. She made the point, and NASA started to listen. And NASA said, okay, all right. So it was Nichelle who helped them realize that when they were going to hire their astronauts for the shuttle, they needed to look more like the rest of the world. NASA asked Nichelle for help. They said, okay, we're going to do this. We need help recruiting people. And Nichelle said, okay, I'm going to come and help you. But this better not be a exercise in just for show. I will go from university to college, and I will find you the most fantastic candidates that look like the real world. And I want them to, and if at the end of this process, we're just back to men, white men, the whole world will know that you did it wrong. She made NASA stick to their word. So Nichelle didn't just do a few videos. She didn't just do a few interviews. She went and she met everybody who built the space shuttle, who built the spacecraft. She met the engineers. She met the people who, the journalists, the people who kept the centers running. She met lots and lots of people. She went into university. She said, you can apply to be an astronaut. And when in 1978 the astronauts were announced, there were 35 of them. There were six women and 4 people from in America from minority backgrounds who didn't have white skin. There was I think an Asian and 3 African ethnicities in that group. So that was a good start, but Nichelle didn't stop there. 40 years later, 50 years later, she's still working with NASA. This photograph was taken far more recently, and she keeps saying to everybody that you can do it, that space is somewhere you can work. And she keeps showing also how important it is that science fiction and Star Trek can work together with science, and how you have to keep challenging what people think, what the status quo is. You can say it doesn't have to be like this, and it will change. Now, one of the people that Nichelle helped to recruit was Sally Ride. And Sally was finally 20 years later than Valentina Tereshkova. She was the first American astronaut in space. She wasn't the second astronaut in space, so the second woman in space. I'll tell you about her in a minute. But Sally Ride was the first American astronaut. And she was selected. She flew the space shuttle. And when she was selected in that class of 36, she and the other 5 women were all singled out. And the media all just kept saying to them, oh, we want to know about how you're going to do your hair. Are you going to cry? Are you going to miss your children? Lots of questions that they did not ask the men. They were not asking the men about their children or their hair or if they were going to cry. And Sally said, look, I'm a woman, but I'm an astronaut. And she just wanted to be asked questions that they would ask other astronauts and be treated like an astronaut. She just wanted to do her job. The rest of her crew saw her just as an astronaut, and she went into space. She flew the space shuttle. She operated the robotic arm. But after she came back from her mission, she started to get letters from women all around the world and children, and she understood what her flight had meant, because finally there was another woman in space, and you could start believing and seeing that space was for everybody. And so she understood how important her flight had been and that it broke boundaries. And after her flight, she worked tirelessly to encourage children from all around the world to follow their dreams. Now, Sally was a very private person. She didn't like the media. She died, sadly, in 2012 from cancer. And her legacy left behind one final little part. When she died, her obituary mentioned that she left behind her partner of 27 years, a woman called Tam O'Shaughnessy. And Tam and Sally had been friends and partners, and they hadn't married because they weren't allowed to, for nearly 30 years. And Sally, she was very private. She'd never sort of been openly gay. And when I was doing the research originally for the book about 5 or 6 years ago, I went back and said, oh, okay, but surely by now we must know of other openly gay astronauts. And today, now we do. And McLean has flown recently and so on. But for years and years, even if you were gay and an astronaut, you couldn't come out about it because people were still saying, oh, astronauts have to be this ideal American, married wife with children kind of thing. That's changing, but it still shows there's still lots of work to do to make sure that we can all be happy, that everybody is accepted, because Sally was a fantastic astronaut. Didn't matter anything else about that. That is the only thing that mattered. So I said that Sally wasn't the second woman to fly into space because the Soviet Union, they always like to upstage their American rivals. And so when they heard that America would be flying more women into space, they said, okay, now we'll fly another woman. And this was the Salyut 7 space station. This was their first, well, their space station that was in orbit in the late 1970s. And the second woman to fly into space was Svetlana Savitskaya. And Svetlana, again, was a fantastic fighter pilot. She'd flown fast jets. She was a world aerobatic champion. And she flew into space in 1982, just beating Sally into space. And just like Sally, the media asked her all kinds of silly questions. A woman going into space, they wanted to know, would she cry? Was she going to do her hair? They did not ask her about what was she like, anything that was to do with being in space. But unlike Sally, when Svetlana arrived at the Salyut space station, her male crewmates kind of gave her an apron and pointed her at the kitchen, and they just said, you're the woman, you're going to do all the cooking. She was very cool, and she took the apron, she gave it back to them, and she said, well, you're the hosts. As Svetlana was just visiting the space station, these people have been there for a few months. She said, I thought you were cooking. So she was unflappable in the face of all these sexist views, but she had just the same challenges and problems as Sally. Svetlana flew in space twice. The picture on the left is her doing a spacewalk. And again, she was the very first woman to do a spacewalk. And really the reason the Soviets put her there wasn't because they were starting to accept that women could do these jobs, but because they knew that America was hiring women, and that Katherine Johnson was going to do a spacewalk a little while later, and they wanted to claim the first. So the Soviet Union always knew the value of the first, but they never followed it through with women flying in space. So far, after Svetlana Savitskaya and Valentina Tereshkova, there have just been 2 other Russian women fly in space, compared now to the 500 or so people who have been into space, and about 150 of those have been women. And so, there's still a long way to go. Salyut was a space station. The next space station that the Russians built was Mir. And I want to tell you about Helen Sharman. Now, I mentioned Tim Peake back at the beginning, but Helen Sharman is the first British astronaut, and she flew to the Mir space station back in 1989. She spent a week there. And Helen was after the Americans and the Russians, she was the first woman from anywhere else in the world to go into space, and she was British. And Helen described her upbringing as very ordinary. She liked science. She was a chemist. And she heard an advert on the radio one day that said, astronaut wanted, no experience necessary. And this was the program that was going to send a British astronaut into space. You had to be physically fit. You had to be aged between 21 and 40. You had to have a science degree, and you had to be able to learn a language, and that was it. And she went, oh, I tick all of those boxes, tick, 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 tick. But she still went, she got the application forms, and she still said, it will never be me. I know, no bother, no point putting the application in. And then right before the deadline, she said, no, come on, this is silly. I'm never going to get this opportunity again. She filled the forms in, she sent them off, and she forgot all about it. And then a few months later, she got a phone call, and she said, would you come and join the testing? And she joined the testing to go, they went through a similar set of medical testing. And she still thought, well, it's never going to be me because I'm a woman. The more it got, the numbers went down and down and down. She kept trying to do her best. She still thought, it will never be me who's selected. I'm a woman, and they clearly are going to fly with Russia. They want a man. We've talked about how they like all the men to fly, but she did her best. She wanted to see just for herself how far her body could go. And by doing her best and always doing her best, in the end, she was the one who was selected, and she flew into space and spent a week in space in 1989 and was the very first British astronaut. So if you just do your best and just apply, you never know what might happen. And if you don't do those things, nothing will happen. So now, up to date, this is the International Space Station. This is flying today. It's an amazing science laboratory that's been in space now for 20 years. And this was the part that I worked on. And if you look at my cursor, you can see this little bit here. This is the Columbus module. This is what I looked after. This is what Tika helped look after. This was what we worked on. This is where the European astronauts do a lot of their science experiments. And it's a fantastic device. And I want to just tell you about somebody that I work with called Ginger. Now, Ginger Kerrick wanted to be an astronaut. Always wanted to be an astronaut. She remembers when she was 5 years old and she saw a picture on the front of a book of an astronaut. She said, that's what I want to do. And she wrote to NASA when she was 13. And she said, what is it? What do I need to do? I want to be an astronaut. I want to work at NASA. And they said, stay in school. You've got to work hard. You've got to study science and maths. And so that's what she did. And when she finished university, she applied to NASA. She got a job at NASA teaching astronauts because she wanted to be an astronaut herself. And so she thought this would be a really good job. And as soon as she could, she applied to be an astronaut, and she did well. She got through lots of the different rounds of selection until it got to the medical, and she failed the medical. And she was told she was never going to be an astronaut because she had kidney stones. She didn't know that she had kidney stones. This was something that affects your kidneys, and it just meant she could never be an astronaut because NASA wasn't going to send someone into space who might suffer from kidney stones. She was really sad. She was really disappointed. How could she go back to work and keep training all these astronauts that she dreamed of being, knowing now that she was never going to be one? But she gave herself a talking to. She pulled herself together. She went back to work, and she worked as hard as she could. And she went, you know what, I'm going to train all of these because everybody has to go through me, and a little bit of me was going to go into space. And she did that. She then ended up helping to train. She went through astronaut training because she went to Russia to learn about the new International Space Station so she could help teach parts of it. So she went through astronaut training. She then got a job in mission control as Capcom. Now, Capcom, capsule communicator, is the person in mission control who talks to the astronauts. And it had always been an astronaut job. But she proved that she could do it just as well as the astronauts. And she got that job. And then in mission control, she looked across the desk and she saw the flight director. Now, the flight director is the person who is in charge of mission control. And they're the ones who have responsibility for the whole space station. They're in charge of the team. They make the decisions. They sit in the hot seat when things start going wrong. And she said, that's the job I want. I want that job. And I agree. It is the best job. And she got the job. She got her dream job. And she now says, thank goodness I didn't become an astronaut, because then I wouldn't have been a flight director. And a flight director job is better than an astronaut job. She thinks it's her dream job. And there have been over 500 people go into space and be an astronaut. But less than 100 people have been a flight director. So Ginger is even more special than the astronauts. And you never know which way life is going to lead and which way it's going to go. But Ginger went with it. And now she's got her dream job. Now we're running out of time a little bit. So I want to tell you very quickly about Liu Yang, because we now have not just America and Russia working on the International Space Station, but China have got their own space station. And there was a spacewalk just a few days ago. China are now up and coming and competing and get with it to be a space power. And Liu Yang was the first Chinese woman in space. And she was also a military pilot. And she was selected through an incredibly rigorous process. And China kept it a giant secret. Not only did she have to be medically fit, she couldn't have any scars on her body. She had to have the right kind of accent. She had to have the right kind of upbringing. China were very, 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 very strict and particular on what would be in their astronauts. And Lu flew in 2012 to China's first space station called Tiangong-1, and she was there for 8 days. We don't know if she's going to fly again in space, but now that Tiananmen, their new space station, is in space, I really hope we see Lu go back into space again, and also the other female astronauts from China. And then the very last person I just want to tell you about a little bit is Gwynne Shotwell. You might have heard of SpaceX, very big company now, led by Elon Musk, who are doing exciting things. They are they have a space ship called Dragon. They fly to the International Space Station. They're going to take very rich private people into space. They're a very big, exciting company. The person behind Elon Musk who actually makes all of this happen is Gwynne Shotwell. She is the Chief Operating Officer of SpaceX. Now at school, she liked maths and physics and problem solving and science, but she was really worried about being called a nerd if she pursued engineering. She was really worried it wasn't cool, and she wanted to be cool. She wanted to be popular. She wanted to be down with the kids. So she wasn't sure that she should go and do engineering. But one day her mother took her to an event and she met some engineers, and she saw that these people were normal, and it wasn't a strange job, and it was an exciting job. And so she went off, she carried on, she followed her dreams, she studied engineering. And she joined SpaceX 20 years ago now, back in 2002 when she was an engineer. She rose through the ranks, and now she uses her engineering skills every day to make sure that SpaceX is the company that is doing so well. And there you go. And if now she has a very cool job at the coolest space company, some would say, and because she was brave enough to keep doing what she enjoyed doing. And all of this now is leading on to Mars. And in your lifetime, we will see people living on, working on Mars. And it's going to be a big global effort. It's going to need all the countries in the world to work together. And so if you want to get involved in this, and there are going to be so many different jobs, so many different people, not just the astronauts, but the engineers and the people who design things and the people who do interviews and the journalists and the lawyers and lots of different jobs, you could be a part of it. And the thing I really want you to know is that it's not just about boys, it's for girls as well. Now, this picture was taken by my niece. She now is 8 years old. This was a few years ago when she was learning to write. And she is someone who really likes science and learning about things. And she likes football, and she likes cars, and she likes lots of things that people think about are boys' things. And we are teaching her that it's not just for boys, it's for girls. And she found this book, and without anyone asking her to, she took a label and she stuck on, there's lots of sellotape. She said, and it's for girls as well. She said, for boys and girls. And that's the point, is that everything is for everyone. And the other thing that I hope you have learned listening to these stories is that all of these people I've talked about, they liked science, they liked maths, they wanted to work in space. And people tried to say to them, no, you can't do it because you're a woman, or because of where you come from, or because of what you look like. And it had nothing to do with any of that. They ignored those people. They kept going. They did what they liked doing. And then they've gone on and they've done amazing things that have got astronauts and humans into space. And that is true for you, and it's true for anything you want to do. If you want to do something, never ever listen to anyone who says you can't do it. The only person who can decide that is you. And so you keep doing the things you like doing, and you'll see in your lifetime people on Mars. And it could even be you, if that's what you want to have happen. And you can certainly be a part of it. And so all of these stories are from my book. They're from Galaxy Girls. So you can read all about them and the beautiful illustrations in there. And I've got another book out at the minute as well. It's just been released in the US. And so I think you should be able to get a copy in Indonesia. And it's called Space Explorers. And it's got the real stories of what happens to astronauts in space and how things go wrong. It's got lots of real stories, and it's also beautifully illustrated. And so that's me now, and lots of stories, lots of time to stop talking. And I think now it's time for me to hear from you, and I can answer your questions, and I want to find out all about you. So thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Libby. Actually, I'm very teary. I mean, I've already been teary since the time I read your book. Maaf ya anak-anak, buat Iwa udah punya bukunya duluan. I already have your book. Look at this. I'm sorry. Okay. Aku punya book. I have 2 books. This book, you cannot see my book. Okay, so this book, I have this book, and I have the other book too. Okay, and both of them are really, really awesome. Okay, so Libby, just allow me to have a couple of minutes just to sum up whatever you have elaborated for the kids, so that they can really all of them, all of what you say could get really to their heart, to their brain, and it's gonna stay with them until the rest of their lives. Oke, jadi semua yang dikatakan oleh Libby hari ini, everything that Libby said, it's all about all the inspiring women who are involved in the advancement of space industry. Semua orang yang terlibat di dalam perkembangan dunia luar angkasa. Dulu, in the past, it was only all about men. It's only about boys. Dulu cuma tentang laki-laki saja. Perempuan itu cuma bisa bermimpi. The women can only dream. Mereka, they don't have any access. Nggak ada aksesnya. Semua orang bilang, no, you cannot. Kamu nggak akan bisa. Kamu nggak akan mampu. You're not going to be able to do it. Nggak akan bisa. Tapi akhirnya, apa? Akhirnya mereka semua bisa. Ada segini. Okay, let me just show you. Ini cuma ada 50 nama. Okay, it's only 50 names that Libby mentioned in this book. And I'm sure, Libby, that there are many other names, correct? Yeah, there are many other names. Lebih banyak lagi nama di luar sana. Jadi, pesannya Miss Libby itu apa? Satu, pesannya Miss Libby. If we want something, go for it. Do never listen to anyone who's saying that you're not going to be able to make it, you're not going to be able to do it. Jangan dengarkan orang-orang yang bilang kamu nggak akan bisa, kamu nggak akan mampu, you're only female, you're only a woman. Jangan dengarkan mereka, perempuan, laki-laki, sekarang itu sudah sama kesempatannya. Kalau dulu hanya laki-laki saja, sekarang perempuan. Tadi dengarkan Miss Libby menceritakan, there's so many females who are really, really good in math and physics. Okay, dulu in the past, they cannot be too open about whatever they like. Tapi sekarang mereka bisa. Sekarang sudah bisa. Jadi sekarang, if you like math, if you like physics, and your friend told you that you're a nerd, kalau temanmu bilang bahwa kamu adalah kutu buku kalau suka matematika, jangan didengarkan, go for it. Just ikuti saja kata hati kalian, kalian tahu yang terbaik untuk kalian. Sudah tidak berpengaruh lagi, sekarang sudah ada orang dari Cina jadi astronot. Sudah ada orang yang kulitnya hitam jadi astronot. Ada perempuan jadi astronot. Dan juga there is an astronaut from UAE, I think her name is Nura Al-Matrushi, ya, pakai hijab seperti Bu Atiwa nih, wearing the veil, wearing the hijab just like me, and she's going to go to the space. Oke, jadi sekarang ini banyak yang berhijab pun, you can go to space, why not? Oke, jadi semua yang diceritakan Miss Libby hari ini adalah inspirasi untuk kita, karena Mars is not about Miss Libby. Mars is not about Tante Tika. Mars is not about me. Mars is all about you, right, Libby? Mars is their generation. Jadi Mars itu adalah tentang kalian. Kalau kalian nanti bercita-cita jadi astronot, mungkin nanti kalian yang akan kembali ke BIVITI. So you might be the one who's being Miss Libby. You are going to come back to BIVITI and you're going to tell your friends, you're going to tell your brothers and sisters, your smaller brothers and sisters about your stories about how you can get to Mars. Okay, so now I think it's question time, Libby. I hope you're ready because I think the kids, they're all excited. Okay, you're still muted. Just to make sure you're unmuted. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking.
All right.
Bring it on. Let's do it.
Okay. So before that, I think somebody wants to say hello to you first. Let us highlight her first. Okay. There you go. Hi. Okay. Okay. Hi, Tante Tika. How are you today?
Hi there. Selamat pagi, selamat siang, selamat sore. Hi, Libby. It's good to see you. Been a while.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really, really good to see both of you, and I can see that both of you seems to be really happy to be able to meet each other.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this. I really enjoyed hearing the story.
Thank you.
It was very nice.
When I first heard about everyone, I said, you don't need to talk to me, you need to talk to Tika because she's one of you. She's come there. So I'm so pleased that we made all these connections, and it's so nice to see Tika.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tante Tika. Okay, now let's get to the question. I'm gonna take, for the first one, I'm gonna take whoever has raised their hands. Okay. Whoever is the most enthusiastic. Okay, well, okay, let's start with Alicia. Okay, I'll spotlight Alicia. Okay, Alicia, you can unmute yourself and ask Miss Libby. Introduce yourself. How old are you? And then ask Miss Libby.
Okay. Hi, Miss. I'm Alicia. I have a question that what do you think you're going to be in the future? Or what is your dream job?
That is a wonderful question. Hi, Alicia. Thank you. I don't know anymore. When I was your age, I wanted to work in the space industry. And then when I discovered you could work in mission control, I wanted to work in mission control. And then I dreamed of working in the UK, and I do that now. And so everything I've wanted to do, I'm so lucky I've got to do it. So now I'm kind of just open and excited to see what happens next. It's a really exciting time because we're going to see astronauts walk on the moon in the next 10 years. Now, I was born in 1981, and the last person who walked on the moon was in 1972. So it was 9 years before I was born. And when I was born, that felt like another lifetime ago. You know, the moon missions had been a long time ago. And it's very strange now that it was only 10 years. And it's been now 50 years, really, since those moon missions. And so I'm really excited to see that and to be part of those missions. And so I just hope that I can keep working in my job and I can keep being part of those moon missions. And I love talking to people like you. So we'll see what the future brings. But what I do know is I will only do things that I want to do, that I enjoy doing. That's how I decide what I want to do. Is it something I want to do?
Okay, awesome. Okay, so next questions. Oh yeah, anak-anak, kids, the live transcription, the live translation is still going on. Yeah, so it's gonna stay until we finish the event. Okay, just check on the full transcription. Okay, next question would be from Bilal. Okay, hi Bilal. Just introduce yourself. How old are you, and say hi.
My sister, what's your question?
Hi, Miss Libby. My name is Bilal Abdul Maikaita. I have a question. How do astronauts eat on space?
Hey Bilal, that's a very good question. Let me see if I'm really clever. I can get a picture. Hang on a minute. But the answer is that nearly all the food they eat has to be able to be long life. So you can't go to the shops every day or every week. their deliveries from Earth come every 2 or 3 months usually, and the food has to last all that time. And so most of the food is dried. Here we go. Most of the food is dehydrated and is dried. There, I can do this and I can show you a picture. There you go. So this is what food looks like for the astronauts. Where are you? That's what there we are. Right, so no, hang on. There. So you can see now, I hope. So most of the food looks like this. It's in plastic pouches, and it's had all the water taken out of it. So this is strawberries. I think this is some pasta or some sweet corn, and up here you can see some vegetables. And there's a drink in the middle with tea. And the astronauts take these. In space they fill them up with water, and then hot or cold, and then they leave them for a few minutes, and then they have a pair of scissors, and they cut the top off, and then they eat the food out the packet. So that most of it's dehydrated. Some of it, like this, in this grey packet down here, this is some beef. I think it's some meat, and it is irradiated to kill all the bacteria, and then they can heat it up in a suitcase size hot plate. Basically they have like a suitcase, and that has some hot plates inside it, and they warm it up in that, and then some food is tinned, and some food is just like we would have in the shops. They've got some candy, some sweets here. These are some coated peanuts, and so most of the food that you have eaten, if you eat tinned food, or if you eat anything that you add water to, like noodles or maybe instant mashed potato, you're eating like an astronaut. When the cargo ships come and get delivered about every 2 months, they always have some fresh fruit on board, and it's the most wonderful thing to the astronauts when they get an orange or an onion, actually, but the oranges in particular, because the smell, when you haven't smelled Earth for months, and the fresh juice, they think that is excellent. Now all the water for all of this all gets recycled. So they have really good recycling on the space station, and everything that goes in the toilet, all the liquid in the toilet, all the liquid from the air conditioning units, it all gets gathered together and cleaned up and turned back into drinking water. So yesterday's orange juice might turn into tomorrow's coffee or something like that. But it's really the same recycling that we have here on Earth with all of our water. It's just that we have it in a system that you can see. And all the things we learn from doing recycling in space, excuse me, help us learn more about recycling water on Earth. So there's lots of things we can learn that way.
And I remember there's somebody you mentioned in your book, I think her name is Rita Rapp. I think she's responsible of making sure that all the astronauts get the best flavor that they can get and everything, right? I mean, the book goes to that detail.
Yeah, so Rita was the they had food a lot in the early days, but it was horrible. And Rita was the person who worked out that if you wanted astronauts to work well in space, you should feed them well. We're all better when we've had a nice lunch. And so she, worked really hard to make it work. And the systems we have today are all thanks to Rita, really. So yeah, she was brilliant.
Jadi makanannya astronot itu sebetulnya mirip-mirip aja sama apa yang kita makan, but they're dehydrated ya. Kadar airnya itu sudah jauh menurun. Dan salah satu perempuan yang paling juga sangat signifikan kontribusinya terhadap kualitas makanan para astronot, karena dia percaya kalau astronot itu makannya enak, if they eat well, then they will work well. Jadi kalau misalnya mereka makannya enak, kerjanya juga pasti semangat. Namanya adalah Ibu Rita Rapp. Rita Rapp, tugasnya itu adalah untuk memastikan kualitas makanan. Seru ya? Kemudian the next one will be Shabira. Okay, Shabira, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, hi. Nice to meet you, Miss Libby. My name is Shabira. I'm 8 years old. And I want to ask, you work in this
Mission
that?
control?
Yeah, you're on the mission control, right?
Yes, I did.
So you must be in the office, because if we're not in the office, how do we walk? If you're in the office, like, what does the office look like? Does it have something interesting inside the office?
I will.
Okay, good
Yes.
question, Shabir.
Hang on a minute, let me show you. So I used to work in mission control, and let me find some pictures. Let me show you this picture again, because I can explain what was happening. So let me share. There we go. No, hang on a minute. I share the pictures. It's coming. Right, there we go. Okay. Right, so this was a picture of me working in mission control. So this is what the office is like. And we would spend 8 hours in this room. And it's big. And it feels like, to me, when you walk in, it's a bit like the same as when you walk in to for me, a church, a mosque, a religious place of worship, somewhere like that, because it's very quiet and it's very calm, and everyone's very focused and concentrated. But you have these beautiful pictures, because we have all the pictures at the front. And you can see the pictures on the left. You see the videos that are coming down from the space station, and then we have all the screens that give us and the mission controllers all the information that we need to monitor what's happening. And I would sit there at my desk, and you can see I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different computer screens up with lots of different information on, so that it was all there, and at a glance I could see what was happening. So this screen where my mouse is, this is all the telemetry. It's all the information that's coming down from the Columbus module that tells me what's switched on and what's running, and how much current everything's drawing. And then you had a screen that had the commands that were going, and then this one is the timeline. This was where I took notes, and so on. This over here, this is how you talk to everybody. It was your headset. You can see I'm wearing a headset, and that's so I can talk to people all around the world in the other control rooms. And you can see this is a big room, and so there are other desks, and there are people sitting at all these other desks. And over here to my left, that's where the systems people would sit. That's where Tika would sit when I was there, and would tell me everything that was going on. She would know everything that was really happening with all of the different pieces of equipment. I'd have other people that would look at the experiments, and you would just be able to keep track of everything. And then if I go and find the other picture in a minute, hang on a minute, keep going. There you go. This is a picture of one of the payload control centers. This was somewhere called BUSOC. So this was in Belgium. And this was somebody else. And they have their own desk. You can see they've got lots of monitors. They've got a headset so we can talk to them. They've got all their screens up there. They've got a model of the space station just here to help them organize themselves. So there are people all around the world working in these control rooms. They're wonderful, fantastic places to work. And there's not just control rooms for the space station. You can work in places like this to control satellites and spacecraft. And if Indonesia have any spacecraft, they would be somewhere like that too. There are all around the world you can work in mission control.
Okay, thank you, Miss
Okay.
Libby. I like
Thank-
to write too, so this webinar is really inspiring me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Shabira.
Oh,
You're so
thank you.
kind. Okay. Thank you. So let's move on to, let's see. Okay. Fatih. Okay, go ahead, Fatih. Fatih says in his profile that he's the future astronaut. Okay.
Okay. Hello, Miss Libby. I'm Fatih Rayanonci, and I have a question. What experiments were carried out in the Columbus module?
That's a great question. You've already made it in space, I see. Where have you got there? That's the US lab behind you. So you've already got into space. Let me show you, because I have some pictures here of experiments that happen. So let me do this again. And hang on a minute. Oh. Right. Okay. So I have to share my screen. There we go. So what you can see here, this is the Columbus module. You can see we've got a European Space Agency flag floating around here. And a lot of experiments that take place are on the astronauts themselves. Because when astronauts go into space, their bodies change. Their bones get weaker, their muscles get weaker, their eyesight changes, their skin gets thinner. Lots of things that happen to us all as we get old. And scientists can do a lot of research on the astronauts themselves that will help all of us understand what happens to our bodies as we get old, because we can look at processes and we can look at what's happening to the cells and things like that. And so they take a lot of blood. This is blood being taken. They take lots of samples. And often a lot of those experiments happen in the Columbus module because it's nice and quiet. And those samples then get stored. Let's see if this is going to work. Can you? No, it's not going to work. This is the big freezer that's in the Japanese module just next door, and that's where all the samples get stored. Come on, we can keep going. This is another experiment that happens in the Columbus module. This is an American experiment called Veggie. And I love this experiment, and I think the astronauts do too, because they're learning how to grow plants in space. And this is really, really, really important because if we're going to send humans to Mars, it takes 9 months to get to Mars. That's a long time, and you've got to take all your food with you. If we can start growing some food, it's better because we don't have to take as much stuff. We can reuse the water, but it's also really good for the astronauts. We've all had a very difficult year or two as COVID has swept around the world, and here in the UK I had to stay at home for months. And I don't like staying at home, and nothing changed. And one of the things that for me really helped getting through being in the same place every single day was watching my tomato plants grow. And for the astronauts, it's really nice for them as well, because they can see something green. When you're away from Earth for 6 months at a time, to have a connection, to have something real growing, that's really, really important. So this is an experiment that a lot of them like. And this is in the Columbus module. One of the fun things, I haven't got a picture, but you often actually see light when it's growing at night. The light that this grows in is pink, not white. And it's pink because it's the most efficient way of growing these plants. We see plants as green because their leaves reflect all the green light back into our eyes. It absorbs all the red light and all the blue light. And that's why if you're going to grow plants, you don't need to give them green light because they reflect it anyway. And so you see this whole experiment is bathed in pink light. And it looks very, very beautiful. So those are just 2 experiments. I've got a picture of Victor Glover here, but he's in the Japanese module there. He's doing some bits of experiment. This is one more experiment I'll mention because this was in the Columbus module. This was, I believe, the fluid science laboratory when it was running. So many experiments aren't run by the astronauts. There are over 250 experiments that happen at any one point on the space station. And most of them are run by the people on Earth in the mission control rooms that I showed you. And so you just sort of get the astronauts put the experiments into their containers, and then they leave them alone, and they can't see what's going on. And you just have this sign that says, "Yep, leave it alone, don't touch. We want it to be very delicate." The experiment that was running in here, I think, was a really interesting one because it had a miniature Earth in it, and it was looking at how the fluid span around this miniature Earth that they had modeled to help us help scientists understand what happens in the lava, in the magma that's under the Earth's crust, when it bubbles up and turns into volcanoes. We don't understand how that works, and we can't do experiments for it on Earth because the gravity gets in the way. But you could do them in space, and so that was what was going on in there. So there's lots of different experiments that they're on humans, they're on biology, there can be on physical sciences, lots and lots of different things happen.
Oke, jadi banyak sekali ya eksperimen yang terjadi di ISS itu. So para astronot di sana itu melakukan lebih dari 250 eksperimen selama di ruang angkasa dengan semua keterbatasannya. Salah satunya yang di Columbus module tadi adalah menanam tanamannya untuk melihat bagaimana perilakunya di luar angkasa. Okay, next question would be from Khadijah, and then Juno, and then Fania, and then I'll go to the next ones. Okay. Oh, you got a picture. Okay, Khadijah, you may introduce yourself first to Miss Libby and ask your questions. Okay.
Hi, Miss Libby.
Hi.
First, I want to say, sorry if my English is so bad.
It's okay. No, yours not.
I cannot speak Indonesian or your language, so we're good.
I have a question. How can astronauts understand sentences written with only the numbers 0 and 1?
How can
a
astronauts
great
understand
question.
each other with only numbers? Okay.
How did the computers talk in just zeros and ones? So the astronauts, they talk in English like us, but computers, not just space computers, all computers, my phone, all of these things, they talk in zeros and ones. And just like we have letters, so we have different letters. So we have, my name is a L, an L, an I, a B, and a Y. If I just say L, I, but yeah, well, that doesn't, you put it together and it says Libby, and we know that it's my name. And computers are the same thing. They have a language of words that get put together. And you have to start defining what they mean. And basically 0 can mean no, and 1 can mean yes. But if you put 1 0 1 1 0 together, well, that means something else. And so they just use very, 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 very long words with ones and zeros in different orders to make words. And then the words get put together and they have instructions. And so it's just the same, like we have a language with letters, but they just have 2 letters. And so it's just that the words are much, and the sentences are much, much longer. But it's really the same other than that.
Okay. And it's called what? The binary language?
The binary language, exactly, yes. And if you start going there, and I didn't want to, anyway, yes, look up binary. I won't try and explain binary right now, but it's the same, yes.
Jadi pada dasarnya bahasa komputer, bahasa handphone itu menggunakan angka 101010, tapi itu seperti bahasa kita aja, cuman karena dia hurufnya cuma 2, jadi butuh yang sangat panjang untuk membuat sebuah kode. Okay, next one will be Juno, and after Juno will be Fania. Okay, Juno, go ahead.
Hi, Miss Libby. My name is Juno, and I have a question for you. How long does it take to build the ISS?
Oh, Juno,
Oh.
hello. What a lovely question. A long, long, long time. So the very first, let's get I'll try and, no, I should, but the very first piece of the space station was launched in 1998. And it had taken 20 years really to get from a blank piece of paper to that very first module in space, with all the engineers designing it. And the International Space Station is really complicated and amazing because it has about 20 different, no, maybe 40 different pieces, big jigsaw puzzle that have all met together in space. And they never met together on Earth. So the engineers were amazing. They built the different modules. They built the Columbus module and the US lab and the Russian parts of the space station and the Canada robotic arm and the Japanese module in different countries. And then they all came together and they all work. And the most recent part of the space station, the Nauka module, arrived, about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. So it's still being built. So it has taken, since the very beginning to now, I mean, it's taken 40 years or something to build the space station. So it takes a long, long time. We're still improving it and upgrading it and modifying it all. But it took about 12 years to go from that very first module in 1998 to where we sort of got to a big, fully functioning, initially complete space station. A long time.
That's a very long time, but definitely worth all the time spent to put everything together, right? Okay, next will be Vania. Vania, could you start your video, please, so we can see you? Okay, go ahead, Vania.
Hello, my name is Vania. I am 12 years old. I have your book.
Yay!
I want to ask, what made you want to make this book? Who inspired you?
That's a lovely question. So when I was growing up, I was very lucky. I just got on with things. I went to an all-girls school, and I think that was very important because even at an all-girls school, I liked physics and I liked maths, and I was still seen as the geek, the nerd. I didn't have lots of friends. I was not very popular because I liked science. And if I had to learn all of that with boys as well, and boys saying, oh no, you shouldn't do that, who knows what might have happened. And it was really important to me that when I had the opportunity, I could share with people stories to show that it's not just about the boys, that space is for everybody. And so this book is sort of celebrating all of these people that we don't know so much about, that I don't know so much about, and so that it could inspire other people. But even when I was writing the book, the publishers kept trying to want to turn it into a book for girls. They kept saying, well, it has to be for girls. And the very last story in the book is about the first person on Mars. And I had to keep fighting. And I said, no, it's for everybody. This is not about the first woman on Mars. This is about the first person on Mars, because space is for everybody. It's for girls and boys. And the book is for boys as well as girls. It's for everybody to read. And so it was why it was just really important for me to share those stories. And I just like talking to people and telling people and sharing these stories because I think they're fantastic. And it's a really, really lovely honor to be able to write a book and share those stories with other people too.
Sure. I mean, and that goes as well when their parents saw my my flyer, they were asking me if the boys could join as well. And I was like, we would be very glad if the boys want to join and see their girls, because they're going to collaborate together. When you go to Mars, it's not only about the boys or the girls, it's going to be both of you working together. Okay, and all right, let's move on to the next person. It's going to be Hilmi, one of the boys in the room today. Okay, go ahead, Hilmi.
I don't have any question. I want to show this picture.
What?
Okay, I see the picture.
What is it?
I want to set my background.
Okay. What's your... Oh, awesome.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I need to make
can
this
you,
bigger so I can see it
yeah.
here.
Can you tell us about that picture?
What
Yes.
a rocket.
Okay, what exactly is that?
And this is a rocket want to launch at the moon.
Oh, that's a rocket ready for launch.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Can you take a picture of your picture? Tag me on Instagram and I will tag Miss Libby. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Awesome, Hilmi. All right. Next would be Clarice. Okay, go ahead, Clarice.
I have 4 questions.
Okay.
The first question is it difficult to monitor 8 monitors?
Okay, Clarice, because we have time constraint, I will take your first question, and if we still have more time, then I will take the rest of your questions, okay? So we can share the time with your friends as well, right? Okay, so is it hard, Miss Libby, to monitor 8 monitors at the same time?
Yes, but you
Yeah.
practice and you get used to it. And not only was I looking at all those different screens, I had my headset on and I had 8 different people sometimes talking in my ear because you would be having to listen to different conversations. So it would be like me having this on and listening now to the radio and 2 different radio stations. And you just practice. And you know, riding a bicycle is hard the first time, or swimming is hard the first time. But if you keep practicing, it gets easier, and you know how to look for the right things. It's like learning to drive. You know, is it hard in a car to look at what's behind you and in front of you and how fast you're going and so on? And you just practice looking at the right places at the right time, and you just learn and you know. So it's hard, but anyone can do it. You can do it.
Okay. Jadi semuanya pasti susah. Okay? Semuanya pasti susah, tapi kalau kita belajar, kita pasti bisa. Okay, the next one will be Azka. Go ahead, Azka.
Hello, Miss Libby.
Azka, can you get closer to the microphone so we can hear you louder?
Why don't you use a pencil in space?
Why don't you use a pencil in space?
Oh, and we do sometimes. But I think you think of there's a great story that America spent lots and lots of money learning to make a pen that works in space, and the Russians sent a pencil. And I think that's a bit of apocryphal story. It wasn't true. So they use pencils in space. We use pens. And one of their favorite pens, let me see if I can find it because I have one. I've got to. I can't. My pencil pot's gone missing. But you can see a lot of the writing I had. They just like using Sharpie pens. So if you know the Sharpie pens, they work in space. So they don't have special pens in space. They've just got pens and pencils. So and then one of the very first cosmonauts, Alexei Leonov, he took pencils in space and he drew pictures. And people have painted in space. So you can use lots of different things in space, whatever you want in space to write or to paint or to draw.
Okay. Thank you, Azka, for the question. That's very interesting. Next one will be Azka. Azka Deskapira. Okay, go ahead, Azka.
Is it very important that teamwork is in space? Teamwork is very important because without it might crash or like there's mishap.
Okay.
Yes,
How important is teamwork?
Teamwork is absolutely the most critical thing. And we are a huge team. We talk a lot about the astronauts, the 6, 7 astronauts now in space, but they are supported by a team of probably about 100 people all around the world, 24 hours a day. And they all have to work together as a team. And those people have to work together with all the people in their countries, the thousands of people who have come together to build the spacecraft, who know how to operate it. We have to work as a team. If we don't, it goes wrong. And so teamwork is absolutely the most critical thing. If we all started thinking on our own, we would never have put together any spacecraft mission, never mind putting together the International Space Station, which is just, it's 100 meters long, it's 100 meters wide. There are lots and lots of different countries come together to build it. We have to work as a team. Yes.
Oke. Jadi penting banget kerjasama itu, dan kita harus bisa kerjasama ya, dari sejak kita di bumi sampai kita sampai di luar angkasa, kita harus kerjasama. Jadi harus baik sama teman. So we have to be kind with our friends, and they have to, and they will be kind as well to us. Okay, the next one will be Irene. Irene, you may unmute yourself. Okay.
Hello, my name is Irene. I'm 7 years old. I'm grade 2 from primary school. So I wanna ask, if we are in outer space, if we jump, we can float to the sky, right?
Oh. If you jump from the space, can we just float around, Libby? What would happen?
Yeah, so this is where it's very good fun. Now, yes, if we're in space and we jump out of the spacecraft, we would float. You'd need to wear a spacesuit so that you can breathe and stay alive in space. The big problem you would have is if you floated, you wouldn't be able to get back to your spacecraft, because the way the laws of physics work, you think if you are on an ice rink or something, or in a swimming pool, and you say imagine you're on a swimming pool and you're in a boat and you're bobbing along, and suddenly you're in the middle of the pool and you have to get back to the side. The only way you can do it is by paddling. But if you couldn't paddle, you couldn't get back to the side. And in space, you can't paddle because there's no air. There's nothing to hold on to. There's nothing to pull onto. And so it's really important the astronauts don't jump off the side of the space station, because they wouldn't be able to get back. They have an emergency rocket jetpack, so they could get back. But you wouldn't fall to Earth because you're traveling so fast. The space station is flying at 17,500 miles an hour, which is about 28,000 kilometers an hour, sideways. And it's falling down to Earth with gravity, but because it's going sideways so quickly, it misses Earth and it keeps going round, and that's how you fly around the Earth. And if you're on the space station, you're also flying at 28,000 kilometers an hour. And so if you jump, you just add a little bit and you just keep falling around the Earth, and you orbit as well. So you would float, but please don't jump off the side of the space station.
Oke, nanti kalau kita lompat, kita bisa melayang, tapi kita nggak bisa kembali lagi ke space station, okay? Okay, next question will be from one of our guys here, Leon. Where are you, Leon? Leon, hi, Leon. Hi, there you go. Okay. Okay. What's your question?
Hi, Leon.
Bukan Leon, Leon.
Oh, Leon. Sorry, not Leon, Libby. It's Leon. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Leon.
Yes.
Apa, Leon, pertanyaannya?
Bagaimana cara bikin roket?
Okay, how could this smart people make the rocket?
How could they make the rocket? They work together. I'm sorry, I got your name wrong. How does everybody make the rocket? They work together. They start with some designs. You remember I talked about Gwynne Shotwell and SpaceX. Yeah. They have a philosophy. They test and they test and they test their designs until they go wrong, because when they go wrong, well, we learn why they've gone wrong and we can fix them. And so you have to keep testing and practicing, and you do it a little bit at a time. So you work out a design and then you test it, and then you check that works, and then you do a bit more. And this is how slowly you go from getting a spacecraft in space to a human in space, and then you learn how to live and work in space. And now we're going to go to the moon to live and work in space, and then one day we're going to go to Mars. So you just, with teamwork and by checking as you go along and really doing it a step at a time.
Jadi semuanya dari kerjasama dan dimulai dari sebuah desain, oke? Dari desain, and then baru berlanjut ke hal-hal yang lebih rumit. Oke, berikutnya coba kita ke Farah dulu deh. Farah boleh di-unmute? Okay, go ahead, Farah. Yeah.
It's very nice to meet you now. I would like to ask, what was the most hardest or maybe saddest thing and the most fun thing you've experienced in UK Space Agency?
Okay.
What was the hardest and the most fun thing? I think it was the same thing. So when I came back to the UK, I ran the education program to connect with people all like you all across the UK and show them how exciting Tim's mission was. And that was very hard work. We had 18 months and not a big team. I had to work very long hours. But it was much fun because I enjoyed what I was doing and I believed what I was doing in. I worked really hard. And to see the smiles of everybody, and to when we worked with the children when Tim went into space, that was really exciting. But I think also that was at work. But the other thing I'm really proud of, and it was also really hard. I learned to run, and I ran the London Marathon. That's 26 miles, 42 kilometers. And for me personally, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I was so proud of myself because I always thought I could never do it. I could never run that far. And then I read a book and it said, yes, you can. And I started and I did it and I ran the London Marathon. And now I still run regularly and keep fit. And to me, that shows that you can do anything you put your mind to. And so, just get on and do it. Don't let people tell you can't. If you want to do something, if you want to run a long way, or if you want to do something, you make it happen.
Wah, jadi yang susah dan yang paling menyenangkan itu sama-sama pernah dijalani sama Miss Libby ya. Jadi nggak ada yang susah selama kita emang yakin kita mau dan kita coba lakukan. Oke, next would be Khairana. Go ahead. What's
Hi,
your
Miss
question?
Libby. My name is Hairana. I have a question. What do you like the most about space?
What do I like the most about space? I don't know. I have always liked space. I think the sky at night with the stars is pretty. And then I find it really interesting to think about the planets and what they're like and that they're so far away. And then I like the challenges and the stories of putting humans into space. So for me, it was Apollo, and it was the stories of going to the moon that I found really interesting and exciting. I don't really know why. It was just what I liked, and so now I work in it. And I think mostly it's that it's beautiful, and there's lots to learn.
Jadi banyak hal, satu cantik dan yang kedua banyak hal yang bisa dipelajari ya. It's not only that it's beautiful, but there are so many things that we can learn from the space. Okay, next would be Faras.
Hello, Miss Libby. My name is Faras, and I actually have 4 questions.
Okay, pick one that you want to ask the most.
Okay, this is the one I really want to know. Can the astronauts go into space while we are still in this pandemic?
That's a very good question. Yes, they have been going all the time. But even without the pandemic, even without COVID, when we send astronauts into space, we want to make sure they are completely healthy, because you do not want to get sick in space from COVID or from flu or from a cold or from a broken arm or from anything. You don't want to get sick in space because you have no doctors up there. You can't get to a hospital quickly. We want them to be healthy. So anytime an astronaut goes into space, before they fly, we put them in quarantine. We lock them away for 2 weeks. We make sure that they're fit and they're healthy. The same way now that we're learning all around the world that we put people in quarantine if they get COVID. And so the astronauts have been going, and we just made sure that, as well as not getting sick for anything else, that we made extra sure that they didn't have COVID. But it was just what we always do anyway, to make sure that we don't send germs up to the space station.
So the mission doesn't stop. It continues with precautions. Ya, oke. Jadi tetap ada misinya ya, Faras ya, tapi dengan kehati-hatian. Oke, next would be Fatih, one of our gentlemen as well here.
Bagaimana cara membuat baju astronot?
Okay. How do they make the astronaut suit?
How do they make the
How do they
astronaut
make
suit?
the astronaut suit? Yeah.
That's another story that's in the book. Let me see if I can find the pictures for you. Because they make them by hand, and let me just see if I can find it.
ILC something, is that the one?
Huh? I'll
The
find
ILC seamstresses?
Yes. You have it?
The ILC seamstresses? Okay.
Yes.
I have it in the.
You find the picture. Yes. So you have to move it forward. But so these were the women who made the spacesuits for the Apollo astronauts, and they used to make underwear, but they sewed all the thing by hand, and that's still how we do it today. We still make all these spacesuits by hand, 36 or something different layers all come together. Not only do we have to sew the spacesuits, we have to sew the parachutes that launch and come down to make sure that everything lands properly. So it's all done by hand. It's all done by very skilled people.
And not fabricated?
No. It's. I mean, they might use sewing machines and things, but we only have a few spacesuits. They're very bespoke, and we have to make sure that they're completely safe, because these spacesuits have to protect the astronauts from space. Yeah. And the big white spacewalking spacesuits that you see, the astronauts do the spacewalks in, they're based still on those designs that the ILC seamstresses make for the moonwalking suits. That the design is really that old. When we go to Mars, we might see a new spacesuit, but the spacewalking suits were designed in the 60s.
Wow! So all hand sewed and checked visually to make sure the safety of all astronauts. Okay. Next would be Quinn.
Hi, Miss Libby.
Hello.
Name is Sarah. Can we bring our pet into space?
Can we bring our pet to the space?
The iPads?
No, your pet. Rabbit.
Oh, pets. Can you bring your pets into space? Not yet. Not yet. We there have been animals in space before we sent humans into space. The Russians sent dogs. The Americans sent chimpanzees, sent monkeys to see how they would do in space. But now we have some animals. There's been spiders on the space station and fish, but they're there for science experiments. So to take a dog or a cat would be hard. I also don't know how well they would manage with the floating, and if they'd figure out how to float around. It would be interesting to see. But for now, you're going to just have to take your stuffed, your pet, your toy pets with you.
Okay, that's interesting. And thank you very much, everybody, for your enthusiasm. But we are very much time constrained. And as much as I want to take each and every question from all of you, I think that would be the last question from Quinn. And before we end today's session, I would like all of us to thank Miss Libby for all the lessons that she has taught us today, and for just being with all of us here today. Let's thank Mr. Miss Libby, before we close the session and we listen to a few more words from Miss Libby, let's check with Miss Libby. What does she think about all the Indonesian children? Okay, let's say thank you, Miss Libby. Thank you so much for being with us.
We can take a picture of you all. Okay.
Okay, so before, don't go anywhere. Okay, don't go anywhere. Let's listen because I'm curious to know what Miss Libby think about all the Indonesian children. What does she think about all of you today? Oh, you're still muted,
I'm
Libby.
Sylvia. I am so happy to see all of you, and there are so many of you. I mean, there's 100 people on this call, and your questions have been amazing. You are all so smiley. I am blown away. I'm so happy I had this chance to talk to all of you. And I want to know, and maybe you could send me some information. I'd love to know what your life is like, what your science and your maths is like. And this has been absolutely brilliant. I do, if you get a chance to read my books, that's great. I cannot believe that my book has made it to Indonesia and that you've asked me to come along and say hello. So what I just want all of you to keep remembering that you can do whatever you want to do. And that's the most important thing, whether it's maths or science, and it doesn't matter what you look like or what you wear or where you come from. That's all of that is your choice. And you can go and do whatever you want to do. And that's the best thing.
Thank you so much. We're very, very happy to have you with us today. And we really appreciate that you are willing to wake up early, like really, really early, just to be with all of us. And let me read a couple of lines from your book to motivate the children. And in her book, it was said that there are some common themes that run through the stories in the book that Miss Libby written. The women, regardless of the period of history they were living in, they refused to be limited by any barriers that society tried to place upon them, and they wouldn't listen to anyone suggesting that they couldn't or shouldn't strive to fulfill their ambition. They followed their passions, grabbed opportunities whenever they arose, stay motivated, and always endeavored to do their best. And Miss Libby believes that it's the space, it's the same chance for everyone. The whole universe, it's out there, and the universe is actually waiting for us. Wow. Okay. So, jadi kegiatan hari ini anak-anak sudah selesai. We're done with today's activity. We're done with today's event. But surely whatever you have told us, whatever you have taught us, they would stay with us for a very, very long time. And I'm excited to see if there would be anyone 10, 15 years from now being astronaut because the motivation they got from you today in 2021. Okay, so children, as I already mentioned in Instagram as well, that we have some giveaways for all of you. There will be 10 winners. It's very easy. It's very easy. All you need to do is just to write something or draw something, whatever you feel like. I just want to know what inspiration you got from today's webinar with Miss Libby. You may post your writings or your drawings or when you were telling stories through a short video. Tag us on Instagram, tag BVT on Instagram, and tag Herba Sehat Official on Instagram, and we will select 10 winners as a token of appreciation for whoever is submitting the writings or the picture and anything. Everybody will get the certificate. So thank you so much once again, Libby. I hope this is not going to be the last time we see you. We really wish that our opportunity could cross again in the near future. Take care. We hope that you have a great day. I think like what time is it now at your place? Is it
9:30 in the morning? I'm going to go and have breakfast.
9:30 in the morning. So let's say goodbye, everyone, to Miss Libby, and we'll see her again in the future. Bye, Miss Libby.
For spending your time with us.
Bye. Don't go anywhere. We haven't taken any pictures. some pictures, but let's take pictures. Okay, for whoever camera that is still switched off, let's switch on your camera and we'll take some pictures together. Okay. Okay, Libby, are you still around? Okay. Okay, Libby is still around. Okay. And
Still here.
oh, okay, one more time, one more thing that I forgot to mention. Let us meet Om Damar. Om Damar, can you start your video? Okay, there you go. Let's say thank you to Om Damar big time, because Om Damar is the one that is putting all the translation today throughout all this 2 hours plus. Okay, so let's say thank you to Om Damar so everybody can get the translation and can follow today's event despite the language barrier. So thank you, Om Damar.
Thank you, Om Damar.
So now it's picture time. Everybody get closer to the camera. Your best smile, please, because I'm going to take a couple of pictures of all of us. Okay. Okay. I will take okay. Everybody, I will count to 3. The first one, okay? 1, 2, 3. Okay, hang on. There will be another one. Oh, Tante Tika's also smiled so big. I think she's very, very happy to be able to be reunited today with Libby. Okay, the next one. 1, 2, and 3. Look at Shabira. Okay. All right. Hang on. There you go. All right. So thanks a lot, Libby. Once again, we appreciate the time you spent with us. Send our regards to the family. Hopefully, we can meet again sometimes in the near future.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Libby.
Thanks,
Okay,
all. Bye.
Hey, let's say goodbye to Miss Libby. Hi, bye, Miss Libby.
Bye, Miss Libby. Bye-bye, Miss Libby.
Miss Libby.
Anak-anak, untuk minggu depan kita ada kegiatan. Ada yang udah tahu belum kegiatan minggu depan tuh kita ngapain?
Belum.
Oke. Jadi minggu depan kita ada kegiatan namanya Who Wants to Be a YouTuber? Siapa yang mau jadi YouTuber? Nah, banyak ada yang mau jadi YouTuber. Aja tunjuk tangan. Om Damar aja tunjuk tangan. Om Damar pengen jadi YouTuber juga. Jadi minggu depan kita akan ada kegiatan Who Wants to Be a YouTuber? Siapa yang mau jadi YouTuber? Dan kegiatannya itu nanti akan diisi oleh Kakak Jovial Dalopes. Kakak Jovial Dalopes ini dulunya punya YouTube channel. Hah, kok dulunya Bu Atiwa sekarang nggak punya lagi? Minggu depan kita tanya ya, kenapa Bu Atiwa bilang dulunya punya YouTube channel. Kakak Jovial Dalopes punya 3.300.000 followers di YouTube-nya. Ya, dan Kakak Jovial juga adalah seorang sarjana dari Universitas Indonesia. Kakak Jovial ini juga membuat beasiswa sehingga anak-anak Indonesia yang butuh bantuan pendidikan bisa sekolah seperti kita. Kakak Jovial ini juga punya adik namanya Kakak Andovi Dalopes yang juga sangat-sangat kreatif dan kita akan ketemu dia. Nah, sekarang Bu Atiwa mau ngingetin nih, gimana caranya kalau mau ikutan kegiatan ini. Nanti oke? Nanti langsung bilang Mama ya. Nomor 1. Link untuk pendaftarannya sudah ada di profile Instagramnya BIVITI. Oke, jadi bilang sama Papa sama Mama, Papa, Mama, cek profile Instagramnya BIVITI. Di situ ada link tree, di dalamnya ada formulir pendaftaran untuk kegiatan Who Wants to Be a YouTuber. Oke, nah itu diisi. Dan yang diisi juga salah satunya adalah yang harus benar adalah alamat email. Ya, jadi alamat emailnya diisi yang benar, bilang sama Papa sama Mama, ngisinya nggak usah buru-buru. Nanti kalau buru-buru jadinya salah ketik. Kalau salah ketik jadinya Bu Atiwa pas ngirim email nggak nyampe. Oke, jadi diisi yang lengkap data-datanya, nama kalian, usia kalian, dan juga yang paling utama, paling penting adalah alamat email. Nah, sama Om Damar udah diketik juga tuh di chat. Nah, itu adalah linknya untuk pendaftaran. Pastikan kalian terdaftar ya, karena nanti Zoom meeting linknya akan Bu Atiwa kirimkan lewat email. Oke, jadi jangan ditunda-tunda. Kalau misalnya buat Iwa ini bilang mumpung lagi sempat, mumpung lagi ingat, langsung daftar sekarang ya. Jadi pastikan kalian sudah terdaftar. Nah, nanti Zoom meeting linknya itu akan ada di mana? Zoom meeting linknya itu pada saat kalian mengisi nanti Google Form-nya akan buat Iwa update. Akan ada di dalam Google Form dan akan ada juga nanti lewat email. Jadi 2 kali ya. Pada saat mengisi sudah bisa lihat Zoom meeting linknya ada di sana. Kemudian Bu Atiwa akan kirimkan juga reminder untuk meeting linknya di hari Sabtu. Oke, Sabtu pagi Bu Atiwa akan sudah blast lagi email untuk mengirimkan Zoom meeting link. Oke, jadi Papa dan Mama harusnya udah lihat pada saat mendaftar, terus nanti sama Bu Atiwa juga akan di email lagi. Oke, jadi pastikan kalian mendaftar karena bakal seru banget sama Kak Jovial itu. Kak Jovial tuh orangnya kayak Om Damar, kayak Bu Atiwa gitu loh, cerewet-cerewet, suka banyak ngomongnya gitu, tapi orangnya seru banget dan orangnya juga baik banget. Nanti kita kenalan sama Kak Jovial minggu depan ya. Jadi kalau ada yang, nah satu lagi juga yang paling penting, kalau di antara kalian sudah ada yang punya YouTube channel, ya, kalau udah ada yang punya YouTube channel, channelnya minta tolong dikirimin ke Bu Atiwa. Boleh kirim lewat WhatsApp, boleh kirim lewat Telegram, boleh kirim lewat DM Instagram, terserah. Coba kirimin channel Instagram kalian ke Bu Atiwa, nanti akan kita pilih beberapa YouTube channel untuk kita buka pada saat kegiatan dan kita lihat sama-sama bareng sama Kak Jovial minggu depan. Nah, kan seru kan? Gimana coba kita punya YouTube channel dilihat langsung sama YouTubernya yang punya jutaan follower. Siapa tahu kita bisa dapat masukan dan YouTube channel kita jadinya lebih keren lagi. Oke, siap minggu depan kalian pada ikutan lagi nggak nih? Ketemu nggak kita sama Kak Jovial kira-kira? Ikutan lagi nggak?
Allah, Kak.
Insya Allah.
Insya Allah.
Insya Allah ikutan. Dan kegiatannya bukan hari Minggu ya, kegiatannya hari Sabtu. Hari Sabtu tanggal 28 jam 1 siang. Kegiatan Who Wants to be a YouTuber bersama Kak Jovial Lopez. Tapi jangan khawatir, nanti buat Iwa juga akan ingetin papa mama lagi lewat Telegram. Yang penting sekarang langsung aja habis kegiatan ini mendaftar lewat channel yang lewat link yang ada di bio BIVITI atau klik nih link yang udah dikirimin sama Om Damar di kolom chat. Oke, semuanya kalau begitu sehat-sehat. Sampai ketemu minggu depan. Dadah semuanya.
Dadah buat Iwa. Dadah.
Assalamualaikum. Dadah. Aku hitung sampai 5, aku tutup ya. 1,